Welcome, everybody. We'll just give folks one or two more minutes to join. While you're waiting, you can answer our poll question on your screen. We got a couple more for you. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us. Good evening. Welcome to the Ask a Real EV Owner webinar. See these last few answers coming in. And I think we'll get some of these poll questions. If the topics don't come up organically, we can make sure we address them later in the Q&A. Welcome again. My name is Nate McFarland, and I am the Communications Director here at Generation 180. I'm joined tonight by my colleagues, Program Manager Blair St. Ledger Olson and Program Associate Jamie Wirtz, and some awesome panelists that are here to answer all your questions about EVs. So super glad you're joining us. Couple house rules for tonight. We're going to be interacting with our panelists through the Q&A box. So at any time you can submit your question using the Q&A box down at the bottom of your screen, and we'll make sure we get to as many questions as we can. We will be posting the recording on our website, so if you miss any juicy details, don't worry, you can find it later on our YouTube channel or our website. And I think that's all the rules. I'm going to give a very quick overview of Generation 180, who we are and what we do, and then I'll kick it over to Blair, who will be our panel moderator, and we'll get straight to the questions. Thank you again for being here. Thanks for taking our poll questions. Those are fun. Okay, so Generation 180, we are a national nonprofit working to inspire and equip individuals to take action on clean energy. And I think that's one of those mission statements you can actually understand and use, hopefully. What does that look like on the ground? Well, there's kind of three main buckets to our work. First is what we call flip the energy script. And that's all about communications and content and blog posts and videos, all about moving from a narrative focused on how big the climate problem is to a story focused on where we want to go, a world powered by 100% clean energy. We want a story that says we can do this and you have a role to play. Generation 180 here, we focus on individuals, not because this is all on our shoulders, it's absolutely not, but because certain behaviors and technologies not only directly help fight climate change, but they can help build that political will we need to get to big system level changes. So that's kind of what we do and why we do it. In addition to that narrative piece, we're leading two major campaigns. One is Solar for All Schools, and the other is Electrify Your Ride. And that's kind of that last program is the one under which this webinar sits. And so that's kind of why we're here tonight. We know that solar and EVs are clean energy solutions that are proven to address two of the largest sources of CO2, and that's emissions from our electricity generation and our transportation. So for example, here in Virginia, where we are based, transportation makes up nearly half of all energy-related carbon emissions. So there's a real reason we're here talking about electric vehicles, and we're excited about it. Super quickly, our Electrify Your Ride campaign consists of, you guessed it, three main elements. First, we put on community events that help introduce folks to electric cars. Second, we are working on equipping owners with resources and opportunities like this to be even more effective advocates. And last but not least, we partner with dealerships around the state to offer discounts. So we're active here in Virginia on the ground right now, but we're looking forward to rolling that up to more states in the near future. So with that, I want to hand it over to Blair, my colleague here, who will be moderating our awesome panel. So Blair, do you want to take it away?
I do. Hi, everybody. Thank you guys so much for joining us. As Nate said, I'm Blair. I'm a program director with Generation 180. And one of the campaigns I work on pretty extensively is our Electrify Your Ride program. And in my role as the program manager for this campaign, I have gotten to meet and had the honor and privilege to meet some fantastic EV owners from all over the country and all over this state. So our EV owners today are joining us from the Maryland and Virginia area, and I'm gonna go ahead and let them start to introduce themselves. So John Park, do you wanna kick us off? And everybody, you can go ahead and unmute yourselves.
Hi, I'm John Park. I live in Roanoke, Virginia, and I drive a Tesla Model 3. I've owned it for just a little bit over a year.
Ron, how about you?
Hello, I'm Ron Coltonball. I live in Jefferson, Maryland, about an hour outside of Washington, D.C. I've been an EV driver since 2012, and I've gone from 84 miles in a Nissan Leaf to 110 miles in the next gen Leaf, in the second generation Leaf or second model Leaf. And now my wife and I have two EVs. We have a Chevy Bolt at 230 miles and a Tesla Model 3 at 310. So been there as the technology's grown, and it only gets better, better and better every year.
That's what we like to hear. Paula, how about you introduce yourself next?
I'm Paula Clements, and I live in Clifton, Virginia. And I've been concerned for quite a while about the climate crisis. And so when my 17-year-old vehicle was needing to be replaced, I decided that one of the things that I could do to help the environment was to look for an electric vehicle. Now, my husband and I had been avid BMW drivers, but we felt like we could make the sacrifice because this was what we needed to do. Well, we were really surprised when we got out there and looked, because the days of an EV having the power of a golf cart were long gone, and we were very pleased and excited when we found a Tesla S, and we've been driving that for 3 years, and we're never going to go back.
High praise. Thanks, Paula. How about finance? Why don't we finish our introductions with you?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Finance Cook. I live in Richmond, Virginia, in the suburbs, and been a Tesla driver, Model S 90, about 300 miles of range since 2016. I've had a number of high performance vehicles before this, but honestly, with what I get out of the Model S from an experience, there's no way I'd go back.
Once again, high praise. So I'm going to kick off the questions, some ones that I think are really important to cover. I'll try to direct those questions at particular people, but everyone please feel free to chime in. And we've actually, the first question I'm going to ask is one that has already been asked in the Q&A, which is filling up. Thank you guys for sending in your questions, but it's also a really important one. And it's the question I plan on asking first anyway. So Andrew Curley, thank you for submitting your question. Andrew's from Charlottesville, Virginia. And his question is, Have you ever run out of charge on your car while on the road, and how easily or not easily did you resolve that question? John, I think you've driven the longest distances, so I'm gonna let you kick it off first, and then I'd love everybody's perspective.
So my wife and I have driven, I guess, about 400 miles in the Model 3. And honestly, I've not, the first few times we did it, it was a little bit of a concern, but, you do have to change the way you plan your trip a little bit. And so you kind of have to look at, where you're going to charge, as well as possibly a plan B and a C. But once you get used to the vehicle, like I don't think about it nearly as much as I used to. So I haven't seen that much. It doesn't really even concern me anymore. But at the end of the day, if I carry my mobile charger and I think I'm going to run out of juice, you can always drop into a convenience store, gas station, wherever, and find a 120 and plug up for a little bit. I mean, it's going to take a long time, but there's always that opportunity. So
We did have someone at one of our fall events. I learned something new. Light poles in cities sometimes have outlets built into them. And we had someone literally plug their EV into the light pole at the parking lot. I wouldn't recommend, I'm pretty sure that's illegal, just for the record. I do not condone that method, but it was a new experience. Does anybody else want to share their experience on if they've ever run out of charge, or has anybody tried to get their EV towed or put on a flatbed?
I'll add to that. Between the EVs my wife and I had, we're over 100,000 EV miles and climbing. And so we never ran out of charge. Now, the closest we've come to running out is back in the days when we had our Leaf, sometimes we get home with less than 5 miles of range left. I think 2 was my record. I was trying to push it to just see if I could get how far I could get to. But the key was, even then I wasn't that worried because I learned the range of the car. When we first got the Leaf, we were super conservative about where we could go and how far. And I'd come home with 30 miles all the time. And it's like, well, gee, I didn't need to stop, or I could have gone further. And after a while, you just learn the patterns of how the car works and where you're going. And so we learned that, well, if we're heading this direction, it's kind of hilly and we can't go quite as far. And if we go south, it's flat, we can go further. And you learn those things and you get used to it. Now, the beauty of today's EVs is that with 200 plus miles and 300 plus miles on the Teslas, even that becomes less of a concern because you just don't have that, you don't get that low that much. Driven to Vermont, driven to Detroit, 500 plus miles each way and never had any problems. So.
Okay, I was wrong. You have driven further than John Park. Anybody driven further than Detroit?
I don't know.
Not driven
Pretty close.
500
We've gone to
miles, but
Boston.
there's a. Go ahead, Paula.
No, go ahead. It's fine.
Well, I was just going to say there's a couple of things that I changed in my behavior. For example, when I drive for business trips to other cities, I've driven to North Carolina from Richmond. I've driven up to DC and beyond, up to Baltimore, all the way up to Philly. Couple of things. One, a lot of the hotels now offer you free charging.
yes.
Yes.
And 2, I've noticed that now I tend to set the GPS in the car, which then will go ahead and track my mileage and tell me, hey, without saying you need to go charge, it'll simply, I ask it to take me home, for example, because I'm in Baltimore, and it'll give me directions to a charger along.
Finest, we seem to have lost your volume, but you're not muted. So we'll let you troubleshoot a little bit on your end, but we'll definitely get back to you. All right. Thank you guys for your answers. I think let's move on to the next question. And, on the subject of range and have you ever run out, one thing we hear a lot about is what about the regenerative braking? Can your EV, charge itself? For instance, the Sierra Club put out a report for secret shoppers, and one of the shoppers found and asked somebody at a car dealership and about regenerative braking. That person says, well, as long as you drive around, your car can recharge your battery from 0. That's obviously not true. Poor John. So Paula, why don't we let you start, and then we'll go around with the group on, what your experiences are with regenerative braking and, how much you've noticed it.
Oh, you're asking the wrong person. I could answer the other question, but no, I don't know. And that's actually one of the other good things that I've got to bring up right now. I usually don't like to say that I'm just a girl. That seems real bashing, but I have never been somebody who could care for my car. And I just go out and get in and drive. And I think that the fact that the EVs have so many fewer moving parts and there's so much less to have to worry about, I just drive. I don't think about it. My husband's the engineer of the family. He takes care of, he could probably answer that regenerative braking question, but I don't know. I just drive and my car tells me, and it was just like Venice was saying, I use the GPS in the car to tell me where to go, and it just takes us right into chargers. I think that is a Tesla specific item. But I did have, back on the other question, when I was taking my very first long distance trip, I was going up to Pittsburgh, and there was a supercharger before I got to Pittsburgh, but I didn't know how to know if I'd have enough charge to get into the city and then back out to the supercharger again. But there are chargers coming all over the city, and I happened to find out that the conference that I was going to, the convention center, had a charging station right in the parking garage. So I just pulled in, charged while I was at my conference, and I was fully charged before I even hit the road again. So it's really not near as scary as that used to be my husband's and my first worry, that we couldn't go anywhere because we'd just have to stay around town. But we've never taken our fossil fuel car on a long distance trip since we've owned the Tesla.
That's awesome to hear. Ron, maybe you can tackle a little bit more on how regenerative braking feels differently or how it impacts your range and your mileage.
Yeah, I'll take a crack at that. First off, it just works. So you really don't have to think about it and do anything. That's the first thing to realize. Now, different cars have different options for controlling it. I know in the Bolt versus the Tesla, because we have Model 3, we have both, there's different choices you can make as to how much regen it has, or it has a lot or a little, and how it kicks in. A lot of cars let you make it feel more like a gasoline car. If that's what you're used to, you can do that, and it can be your choice. Now you want to, once you get used to it though, you want to do it as much as possible because it's going to extend your range. It also means you can do a lot more one pedal driving and not use the brake very much. And the great thing about regenerative braking is not only does it save you energy and make your range longer, it also helps to save your brakes. Because with the motor working in reverse and putting energy back into the battery, the friction brakes don't get used very much. Basically for that last little bit of a stop, or maybe for an emergency stop. So your brake pads will last a lot longer than they will in a normal car. Which not only saves you money there, but it means you're not putting all that brake dust on the roads, and which is harmful to the environment. So there's all these benefits. As you get into it, you realize there's just more and more and more that you learn about that why they're just better for you and better for the environment.
So Ron, since you have a Bolt as well, how long did it take you to get used to the one pedal driving? Do you use it very often?
It was very quick to get used to. I mean, it's really just a matter of you don't, well, I guess it varies. So I like the regen to be there and set to be present and be the maximum basically. So I'm using it to its fullest. My wife, she likes it to be a little more like a gas car. Just because she just like the fact that when you take your foot off the accelerator, it slows down on its own with the regen braking. She wants it to be more in control. The beauty of it is you can set your profile so that, you can have your own preferences. But all this stuff is just, it seems scary at first, but it's just such a better driving experience that takes over and the concerns and fears go away. I mean, if everybody could just, have an EV for a long weekend and get a chance to drive it, they're going to like, I'm not giving this thing back. It just becomes the norm, and that old gas car becomes like, why did we live with that?
That's amazing. That's how I've test driven a couple, and I've just been like, what if I just keep it?
Well, and one last thing there, we've all went out and we bought things where we were waiting to buy, whatever it was, this new thing or get a present, whatever we really wanted. We've all found that like, once you get the present or get the thing you've been waiting for, it's like, okay, you have it now. So it's kind of like it becomes the anticipation's over. So it's kind of like, well, gee, what's the big deal? I can honestly say that for the EV, especially the Tesla, the Bolt, yes, but especially for the Tesla, I've never bought anything that truly gets better, and I appreciate it more every month. That anticipation, that excitement of having it, the learning and improvement just doesn't go away. And I've never had anything like that, no matter what I've bought. It's just truly something that you really get into.
So you mean it's not like your cell phone, how when every time they update it, something breaks and you want to throw it through the window?
Or like you get that new camera and it's like, I'm all excited, but then after a couple weeks, it's like it wears off and you're kind of like, okay, I have a new camera. But
it's a paperweight now. Yeah.
This is much different. It's always new. It's always exciting. It's always fun.
That's great. Well, that actually tees us up really nicely for our next question. And John, I think I'm going to let you field this one first, and then Finest, I'll hand it to you. About what was the, most difficult adjustment from going to gas or electric? And you're allowed to tell me there was nothing difficult, but if there was, we want to hear it. John, you're up.
The most difficult adjustment was going back to a gasoline vehicle. Because I mean, we have, it's like we have electric, we also have a gas, but that's honestly, once you go electric, there's, going back to a gasoline vehicle, it's just like, you're like, why are we even doing this? It's dumb. I don't get it. Like, and I'm a big car guy, performance and cars are on the top of my list in terms of why I bought an EV. And, my other car is no slouch by any means, but it has it doesn't even come close. Like most cars don't even come close to the performance that my Model 3 has. And so, that's the hardest challenge, is going back and having to drive my other car.
Good to know. Finest, what about you?
I would have to agree. Thank you, John, for saving me, because I couldn't think of anything. The reality, it reminded me of the first time I drove a gas car after I had my Tesla. I had the Tesla about a month, been just driving it exclusively, and I took a business trip, got a rental car in another city, drove it out of the parking lot over to the hotel, literally got out of the car, closed the door, got my bag, walked away from it, got about 20 feet away before I realized I still had the keys in the car. It was still running. It was still, and I had to go back.
We've all done that.
Because I think most folks would agree that it's a different experience in an EV. So you get used to the car doing things for you that a ICE car never does. And after a while, you forget about it. And then you get in a regular car, and you got to remember, oh, wait a minute, I got to turn the lights on it. hold on. I gotta look at the gas tank, but indicator myself. I've got all those kinds of things. So that would be probably the most difficult.
So you get the EV spoils you.
There have definitely been a few times where I've gotten out of my other car and my wife is like, "Are you going to shut the car off?"
All right, well, I don't have an EV and I've done that, so I don't have an excuse. My EV is coming this year. So I'm just going to use y'all's excuse from now on.
I want to touch on what John said about the performance. And it's fantastic, but it isn't just the Teslas. I was looking around for comparisons. So like I said, we have a Bolt as well. And what could we compare it to? And I was searching around on some car sites and I found a perfect comparison. So for those that are maybe not the youngest people in the audience, but for those who remember the original Magnum PI series where he drove the red Ferrari. In a drag race 6 miles an hour, my Bolt would win by 1/10 of a second with that Ferrari. So
Yes.
Even the Bolt, we talk about the performance of EVs. It's not just the Teslas that are quick. Even the other ones are very quick as well. So it's definitely a good ride to be driving, especially when you're merging into traffic on the Beltway. Oh gosh, I hate that in a gas car.
I don't miss living in the DC area. I'm sorry for all of you who do.
You know, I have another thing that it took some getting used to, that we actually can get upgrades and improvements while the car is parked in our garage.
Yes.
Because we purchased it and it went 0 to 60 in 5.5 seconds. And then overnight we had an upgrade within the first month of having it, and it went 0 to 60 in 4.2 seconds. So with no extra money, I didn't even have to go to a service center to get it. I just had a faster, better car. That's pretty unusual.
I mean, it kind of, in the gasoline
awesome.
world to go from that kind of performance increase would cost you thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars.
For sure. So I think actually Ron brought up a
good
really
news
good
about
point
the,
too that I just want to touch on. Okay.
I was just going to say
Hold
that
on. I'll get to you in just a second.
We've been talking about software upgrades, and that's currently with the Teslas. But going forward, that's going to happen with other cars as well. Ford with their new Mach-E, it's coming out hopefully this year. They've announced they're going to do over-the-air software updates. Yeah. And so while today that's a Tesla-specific thing, the other manufacturers are going to catch up. Oh, yeah. It'll take a while for some, but Teslas won't be the only one doing that shortly.
Yeah, I mean, really, that's where the technology is going. And you raise a good point, bringing up other car models. When everybody hopped on, when all of our attendees hopped on, you guys got a few different polls. And one of those polls were how many plug-in electric vehicle models are there? And 32% of you got it right. Awesome job, y'all. It's 40 different models, and that's actually just for 2019. The reason why we stuck with 40 is because COVID-19 has thrown everything out the wazoo. And so who knows when new cars are going to roll out right now. But before COVID-19, there was supposed to be over a dozen new models rolling out in between 2020 and 2021. So that 40 is the most conservative number that we can give you, but it really is surprising. I mean, let's see, 10% of y'all said 8, 39% said 15, 19% said 25, and then 32% said 40. And I've had legitimate conversations with people who have said, there's only 3 different types of EVs as I'm standing behind 20 different types of EVs. So they're really, there's either a marketing issue or something in the world, but there are so many more EVs than people realize. And I think that's a big point we want to hit, that it's not Tesla or, Leaf. You don't get what's been, coined as the little environmentalist car, the Prius Prime, where people are yelling at you when they're trying to merge on the highway, or the Tesla. There's so many options in between. And, we just want everybody to know that there really are a lot of different varieties and options to fit everybody's needs. So the last question I'm going to ask, and then we're going to open it up to the audience. And you guys you've submitted 24 questions. You guys have been crushing it. Thank you, audience members. So the last question, and we'll start with you, Finest, and then we'll work our way around. But what do your friends say when they learn, or when they first learned that you were getting an electric vehicle? Oh, he's chuckling. That can't be good.
I'm laughing because I kind of set up my friends, because I invited them all over on delivery day to watch the NCAA, the March Madness tournament. So, you know, picture this, all the guys are sitting there in my family room, we're watching it, and they kept asking, why is there a camera on your porch aimed at the street? And so they delivered the car, and literally everybody piled out, and all of them forgot about the basketball. And they were all outside watching this. So I've noticed now that as more and more friends and acquaintances learn I have one, I get the same questions over and over again. A lot of the questions you've been asking here, I just keep getting those same questions. Well, how is it to drive? Do you mind if I ask you questions, etc.? So, I mean, it's the neat thing about it is my first test drive was from a Tesla owner that I drove to the first supercharger station in Richmond just to take a picture of it when it showed up originally. And a driver owner pulled up, pulled his car in, plugged it in, and I said, do you mind I ask a couple of questions? I asked him, he answered them, and he said, do you want a test drive? And he threw me the keys of his P85. And next thing I know, I'm in the driver's seat, and his wife is in the back seat yelling I should punch it as I'm going around a curve. It was the most hilarious experience. But it seems typical of Tesla owners. So yeah, it's always it's mostly a positive experience. I don't have a lot of people being angry or upset or why did you do that or anything like that. It's been all positive and a whole lot of hilarious stories. So.
All right. Well, no one can top your story. And side note, my father is on, and all I can picture him right now is going, I want to do that. I'm like, he wants to have your experience. John Park's already volunteered to take him out. Can anybody beat Finest's story? Most interesting or staged delivery?
Well, I don't think I can beat it, but I'll try to maybe come in second. I was at a work thing, and one of the people there who I work with occasionally, not a lot, he had gotten dropped off with an Uber because his car was in the shop, and he asked if anybody's going a certain direction. I said, oh, I'm going right by where you're going. I can drop you off. And so we're walking to the parking lot. As we're walking toward there, he looks over at me. He's looking ahead, and he goes, "Tell me you have the Tesla. Tell me you have the Tesla." And I kind of paused, and I finally said, "Yeah, that's mine." He was so excited. And this is a guy who's driving an old beat-up pickup truck. And we get in the Tesla, and let's just put it this way: he got a chance of several accelerating off stoplights and things like that, and he was thrilled. And but it was like a little kid, at Christmas time, like having fun, just barraging with questions. And it's always great to do that because people they have these misperceptions about the cars, and when you show them and they get to ride in it, they're just usually, so overwhelmed in a positive way. So
that's awesome. Paula, did you and your husband get asked any crazy questions when you first told your friends?
Oh, because most of my friends knew that I'd be getting an electric car, so they just expected it. But my next door neighbor, when I told her, she had a gigantic SUV, and she came back with well, you better just get out of my way because I'm going to run right over you.
Oh,
so I told her
that's welcoming.
I'd race her anytime. And once she saw the car, I think she realized, yeah, it was not that golf cart that she thought I was going to come home with. So.
Oh, that's awesome. John, what about you? Bring us home.
I don't have one. I'm not sure. I don't have one.
You always have a story, man.
Well, I'll give you my story. The way I got indoctrinated into the world of EVs is I was in Richmond, and I was going to Southern Season. Some of those folks who live in Richmond, there was a gourmet grocery store called Southern Season. And at that time, I was driving an Audi A4 wagon that had some modifications, and they were setting up for an EV meet. And my car was parked close by. I asked her, the organizer, I was like, "Is my car in the way?" She said, "No, it's fine." Well, we came back outside, and lo and behold, there was probably about 10 Teslas, and I had heard about Teslas. I wasn't really into the other EVs, but I'd heard about Teslas and, what kind of performance that they provided. So I started talking to one of the guys that was there from Leesburg, and he had a P85D, which at the time, was probably doing 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds. And he, just like Finis, the guy offered to take us for a ride, and, he punched it. I went cross-eyed, and as soon as I got back, I told my wife we're gonna have a Tesla at some point, regardless if it's a used Model S or whatever comes about. And shortly thereafter, Tesla introduced the Model 3, and we had put our money down the day of the announcement.
And Sharon loves, John's wife is named Sharon. I think Sharon loves that car like almost as much as John. I think John babies it a little bit more than Sharon, but she's close. John washes his car every weekend, but Sharon loves it too. Almost. Okay, so opening it up to.
If I might add something really quickly. My wife is the exact opposite. I've tried to get her to drive it, and she won't. She just calls it the asset. And then and I got her in a parking lot and had her driving it around, and one other time before we got it, I got her to go do a test drive herself, because she wouldn't go with me when I did a test drive. So she got in the car, and the sales lady is showing her, how to operate it and everything. And she said to the sales lady, she's hilarious anyway, but she said to the sales lady, "I'm surprised it's got a steering wheel. The way my husband talks about it, I would have thought it would have just responded to your thoughts."
Hey, maybe one day, right?
Yeah. So John, if you got any suggestions on how to get for me to get her to start driving it, I'm all ears.
That's fantastic. All right, so first question coming from the audience. Do you guys think people don't change or switch over to electric vehicles because the amount of charging stations is limited? So I'm going to address that one first. The amount of charging stations, at least here in Virginia, are not limited. They are being built out. We've got over 1,400 in the entire state. And to throw in some data while we're at it, over 80% of charging actually takes place at home. So have you guys heard that, you have friends who aren't transitioning because they, don't think that chargers are commonplace?
Well, I think it's
I agree with you. I think Northern Virginia has it covered. And I might also say we were at an event. It was a 4th of July parade, and it was, can't even remember if it was put on by Tesla, but there was a lot of Teslas there. And this car drove up, and it was this young guy that had come home from New Mexico, and he had just driven in for the holiday weekend to be with his family. And he thought it'd be fun to look for some kind of meetup, to take his car. And he had no problem driving all the way from New Mexico with his Tesla. So it's not even, you know, I know Virginia, we're pretty, we've got a lot of charging, but there's other places as well. Almost all at least the major interstates, but I think even some of the smaller areas are starting to get it.
Mm-hmm. Ron, were you going to add something onto that?
Yeah, I think it's more a perception problem than it is a lack of charging problem for most people. People are used to seeing gas stations. They're big. You can smell them. They stink, so they're visible that way. Where charging is oftentimes it's there. It's just not. Maybe it's around the corner, or it's just not as prominent. So it's more about people not realizing they're there. And so I always recommend to folks, if you're even thinking about an EV at all, there's a lot of apps you can get, but there's one called Plug Share, which is the most commonly used, that has pretty much all the chargers on that. It's available for your smartphone. It's available for on the web. And just experiment with, when you go places, when you're shopping, when you go to work, visit people, look on Plug Share and see what's nearby. You'll find there's a whole lot more than you realized. And the only place where there's really a problem for charging right now is people who live in apartments or condos. They can have a little bit tougher time because they can't always put charging in where they live. But that's the biggest problem. But that's being worked on. But those people have a little bit of an excuse because it's a little harder. But it's still there's a lot out there. Just they don't see them.
Yeah, and a lot of groups, including Generation 180, are working on lifting those barriers. Yes, John, you're an excellent student. Raising your hand.
So one of the I started the Tesla Owners of Southwest Virginia when we got our car, and one of the members in our group, it does live in an apartment, and so he actually lobbied his employer to install a charging unit at work. And one of the nice things is if you get a Tesla's destination charger at a business, Tesla will give you those for free. Okay, that's a $500 charging unit that they will provide for free. You just have to get it installed and pay for the electricity. Secondly, any cost to install a charger, whether it's at a business or at home, there is a tax credit for that. For I don't know what it is for business. For home, any costs associated with the charging installation, you get a 30% tax credit. So I spent $800 and I got $240 of that back. So just, if you start to see that there are multiple drivers of EVs at your business or at your work, it may be worth a shot to just ask your employer to have them install a charging station, or just have them upgrade a 220 volt outlet, no different from your plug that goes to your electric stove. And you can
your washer or dryer.
Yeah, you can plug right in.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, moving on to the next question as my cat stalks behind my laptop. All right, well, if you lose me, you all know why. So we have a question that says, there's a lot out there to read and watch online, sometimes with conflicting advice. I sympathize, I'm sorry. Where did you find the most reliable advice before purchasing your electric vehicle? Finus, you want to start?
Well, I guess I cheated because I started buying Tesla stock at the IPO point. So I was getting it directly from Tesla. So yeah, and we've been very happy with the stock purchases as well. But so by the time I was actually looking at buying a car, I actually had tons of information directly from Tesla that told me this is what the situation is and this is how you get the chargers, etc. So like I said, I already knew where at the time the sales store was only up in DC, etc. So yeah, I would suggest if someone else had to search around for information.
Yeah, who didn't cheat? I think is the question there. Yes, John.
Well, I'll say, I mean, Generation 180 is probably a good resource for getting information.
I didn't even pay you to say that.
Yeah, but I mean, that's, no, but in all honesty, I mean, you guys are probably a really good resource to get information. But at the end of the day, you kind of have to sit there and figure out what your priorities are. Are you looking for, cost? Are you looking for the most, the highest performance? What is your priority? Because for me, performance was probably the top of my list. And so what I'm going to be looking for is going to be different from what somebody who's saying, okay, well, I just want an EV that I can drive around town that gets me from point A to point B. That's not me. So you just have to figure out what is your priority. It's no different from buying any other vehicle. You just have to figure out, well, what do you prioritize, and then kind of narrow down your decision based upon that. And some of it may be a budget constraint. If you have a budget constraint, then you may have to, buy something like a Nissan Leaf, or, something less expensive like a e-Golf or something like that. So you just have to figure out what is your priority, what are your budget constraints, and go from there.
And now that we have a ton of used vehicles hitting the market, the used EV market is getting bigger and bigger every day. I'd highly recommend all of our participants, if you're thinking about used the way, my family is, and the way a few of my coworkers have gone, Carvana has tons of used electric vehicles of all different shapes and sizes available online, and it gets delivered to your door. So there's pretty much no easier way to shop than having your car dropped into your driveway. Paula, were you going to say something?
Yes, I was. I was going to put a plug in for Ron's group, EVDC. They have a wonderful brochure that does a comparison of all of the plugins as well as the all electric EVs. And they are, it's kind of intimidating going to a dealership, because sometimes it's just like when you're going to buy anything, you're afraid they're just going to tell you whatever it takes to get you to buy their product. Whereas if you go to an event like this one, or you go to, join one of these car clubs and talk to the owners and read their literature, none of us get anything for this. This is from our heart. This is because we have a passion for the product. It has nothing, nobody's going to give us any money because you went out and bought the car. So I think maybe you could feel a little more confident that what we're telling you is kind of the truth, instead of we're trying to get you to buy our thing. And Ron, I think.
Hey, Ron, do you want to show us that resource?
Don't you?
Yeah, let me bring up that. Let's see, share screen.
Well, I may or may not thought it would let you do it.
I'm trying to. Well, it's not letting me. Let's see here.
Well, Ron, while you're doing that, I want to share a quick funny story. Paula, to your point about walking into a dealership can be intimidating, I found that sometimes it's fun just to drive around to other luxury car dealerships in your Tesla and just pull into and sit in front of sales. They tend to come out and say, "Why are you here?"
Wow. There you go, Ron.
Which is hilarious. Oh, there it is.
So what
this
Paul
is
is referring
Ron's
to
group,
is, and
EVADC.
I got started. Am I sharing now?
Yeah.
Yep, you're good.
Yes.
So we'll put this in the chat. And so the way I got started doing this was basically I joined a group, and I'm actually now president of the local chapter. EVADC, we're a chapter of a nationwide group of EV owner clubs. And one of the things we put out is this sheet. We do it every year, and there's a number of things on this page here, but the sheet itself has on it, on the one side, you have all the plug-in electric cars with various specs and numbers and pictures and stats. And then on the other side, you have all the, one side's all the battery cars, and this is all the plug-in hybrids. So you have a lot of detail here, and it's a great resource to get started. And and I think that, what we've all found is that while it used to be that finding a sales guy or sales gal at a car dealership was tough to find somebody who knew about EVs. It's getting easier. They're getting better, but there's still a lot of salespeople that they just don't know, or they just don't care because, quite frankly, it's a little more work for them because they have to explain things. So talking to owners, talking to people that have already been there, that's probably going to be your best resource for the time being.
Yeah, I would concur with that. Dealers can definitely be a barrier to people going electric. And the best way you can get over that is get over that hurdle is to be an educated consumer, just like you guys are doing right now in, asking these questions of real honest to God EV owners who I have not paid to say anything positive about electric vehicles whatsoever. They showed up here out of the goodness of their hearts and because they believe in the technology and they think it's something everyone should know about.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll just want to add to that is that we always, when we do events with EVADC, we always talk about the fact that we can sell EVs on their merits to anybody across the spectrum, whether it's someone worried about climate change and the environment, worry about health, your long-term financial benefits, worry about terrorism and foreign oil. You name a reason, we can tie it to a reason why you want to go with an EV.
For sure. So I'm going to try to speed run through some of these questions that we've got remaining because you guys have been awesome and it's already 7:53. So it seems like I'm rushing, stop me. But I think some of these are ones we can tip off really, really quickly. All right. So have you guys ever had experiences of people being parked in your designated electric charging spot? I can say personally that I've had that happen. I've showed up to a charger and there's been someone parked there. Each state, each locality is working on laws to help make that no longer the case. We almost got that law passed here in Virginia this year and failed just by a very slim margin. So we're really hopeful for 2021. EVgo is a charger installer, and for any of you who are based out of Charlottesville, there is now a new one in the Water Street parking garage or right outside of Zimberger. And the spaces are very clear. There's a huge white paint job that says, EV charging only. There are signs that say, you will be towed. So it really sometimes depends on who installs the charger itself, whether or not, the hotel does anything other than slap the charger on the wall, if they label the space at all. So yes, that is a reality right now that people will charge in your spot or will park in a charger spot, but we're definitely working on that for sure. But again, the majority of the time you're charging at your home or your business where you're not going to be fighting as much for chargers like you would at a convenience store or something like that. Everybody here, I assume, has installed a level 2 charger at their home? Yep. Like you don't have to, like John said, you can plug into a 120 outlet and do what we call trickle charge, but it's really much more convenient.
And I still have the same charger that I installed in 2012 for my original Leaf.
Oh, wow.
It works fine. And even though we have 2 EVs, we basically we'll charge wherever one needs it. It's very rare that we have driven enough miles that need to charge them both in the same day.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an investment that you basically can live with for a long time. So it's you don't have to keep buying one every time you get a new car or anything like that.
Yeah, John, you said you trickle charged for 3 months with your Tesla's big battery.
Yeah. I mean, I had to come home and charge up, plug up overnight, or plug up every day I came home. So it wasn't nearly as inconvenient as you would think it would be.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's, because I only drive probably 20 miles round trip for work. So if I come home, plug it up, I'm getting anywhere from 4 to 5 miles for every hour of charge. So, I come home, plug it up right away. That's plenty to recoup what you use for that day.
Yeah, even on 120.
Yep.
Good question. And I think we've all heard it. Does it make sense to wait until the batteries get better, or should you consider buying now? Finest, do you want to go
buy
first?
now. And you'll
Well,
be mad at yourself you didn't buy sooner.
yeah, there's two things. One, I mean, I was just looking at a YouTube video where they're talking about when the batteries get better, that doesn't mean you're suddenly going to have a 1,000-mile range car. That means the cost will drop. But the reality is, you know, you're never going to drive, and I keep asking people this question and say, aren't you worried about range? It's like, how many times have you actually driven a car 300 miles without stopping? And then when they thought about it, they said, no, I don't do that. So getting a 250-mile range, I mean, I've got 290 rated, but it's actually about 315 from what I've measured with my car. That's more than enough. You're going to drive one way 150, 200 miles at a pop, stop and do something. And if you stop at a supercharger, you're going to be filled back up by the time you take off again. So if you're waiting for batteries to quote unquote get better, find out, like John said earlier, what are your real requirements? What is it you really want? Do you want performance? Do you not want to have to deal with gas anymore? One of the things that I didn't expect, but I've discovered was I never realized how much time I spent when I had an ICE car at the gas station, filling up and then getting something to drink or getting a snack or something while all that's happening. I never realized how much time I actually spent doing that until now when I don't do it. I plug in at home and I drive the car and I come back to home and I plug it in and I come in the house.
Yeah.
You really got to know what your requirements are before you make the switch, so that you'll be satisfied. But because if those requirements are unrealistic, you're not going to be satisfied, and even if you wait.
And for those that are considering waiting, I would say if you really are unsure, one of the things you can do is lease your vehicle. So with our first two, with our Leaf, we got we had a Leaf, 2012 Leaf and a 2016 Leaf. With both those cars, we leased them, knowing the technology is going to improve. And then it wasn't until the Bolt and the Tesla Model 3 that we actually bought them. But today, if you're on the fence, you're kind of unsure, go look at what's out there. Look at our info sheet. Look at the talk to other drivers. Look at what meets your requirements today. And if you're a little bit nervous, then lease it. Do a 2 or 3 year lease, and then you have the opportunity to say, "Hey, maybe there's something better. I can turn it in and get another one." But don't wait, because you're losing all that enjoyment of driving it today, all the cost savings from lower fuel costs, all the environmental savings. So you want to jump in as soon as you can.
I also know that there's going to be a big push for all car dealers to move their vehicles right now. And I just saw that Tesla dropped the price on all their vehicles pretty substantially. So, I can't imagine that the other electric vehicles aren't dropping their prices now too, just because they haven't had any business. So to me, it's really a good time to be going and looking to purchase an electric vehicle.
Well, hopefully other EV dealers also follow Tesla's example. They're doing a great thing in lowering their prices. I want to add just 2 quick things to what everybody's been saying. The first, really to Finest's point, is the average American only drives 30 miles a day for their commute. That's round trip. I drive 2, and I would bike that if I wouldn't get run over. So, an EV makes perfect sense for my family. Doesn't always make sense for everybody's. We respect that. We understand that. But we think you'd be really surprised to find out that it could really be the right car for yourself. John, were you going to say something?
I'm just answering questions.
All right.
Well, Blair, to add to your comment there, also for folks, don't let that 1 or 2 times a year special case keep you out of an EV. because I've talked to a lot of folks where they'll say, oh, but I have to go to Chicago every once in a while and I can't get a Tesla.
You
and so
can
forth.
rent.
For those handful of times, you know, you can rent a car. And so you want to look at your, I always recommend people to keep like a diary or a log of what your driving's like, and then figure out what meets your needs for that. And then if there's just 1 or 2 times that are special, you can rent to cover those and not buy that car for that one time a year you use to do something special.
But truly,
Yeah, for
that
sure.
was the reason, John and I, that was our one concern. And that's why we had to keep our BMW, because for our trips, we'll have to take the BMW. And not once in 3 years have we ever taken the BMW on any trip. And we've gone up and down the East Coast. So
I love it.
it's the Tesla. So you can use that as your safety blanket, but you don't need it really, honestly.
It's your security blanket. I love it. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for us, everybody. Thank you guys so much for joining us. To our panelists, thank you guys so much for joining us on an evening. We really, really appreciate your time. And to our attendees, you guys crushed it with the questions. Thank you guys so much. You sent in over 41 questions. So we really, really appreciate that. So round of applause for our panelists.
Answer some of them. We could send them an email or something.
Yes, absolutely. If you guys want more information, please feel free to reach out to me. My email is blair@generation180.org, or you can email hello@generation180.org. You can definitely reach out and we'll follow up and send answers to the polls and let you know when the recording is posted. And if you had a question that didn't get answered, let us know. We'll either put you in contact with someone who can answer it. We can set you up with, if we know an EV owner in your area post COVID-19, we can set you up with a meet and greet and let you get to see the car and kick the tires. And hopefully we'll be back at it, before we know it, hosting our big, educational events and festivals. And we'll get to, have more fun in real life and show off our EVs in person and not just, awesome backgrounds behind our heads. It's definitely the goal. All right. Thank you everybody so much. Have a good one. Enjoy your evening.
Bye.